We were invited by the curators to respond to Charles Moore's sketch drawings for St. Matthew's Episcopal Church. The idea of the exhibition was that we would imagine an alternative history for these drawings, thinking not so much about the finished building that came out of them, but instead conjecturing or imagining another possible future for these drawings based on our own interpretation and perhaps our own ideas about architecture. We were immediately struck by the quality of these sketches, but also by the way that the drawings, particularly the sections, suggested a really interesting disassociation between the exterior form of the church and the interior space. The sections suggest a kind of thicket of timber structure that makes a kind of poche space, disassociating the shape of the interior from any relationship to the exterior. So this was something we were immediately interested in and sought to explore in the work that we did for this exhibition. The process started with us making our own sketch drawings, responding to the sketches we'd been given. And these sketches thought about this kind of poche space, mainly in section but also in plan, where a kind of thicket of lines, a thicket of thin timber structure could make this really interesting relationship or disassociation of the relationship between the outside and the inside space. These drawings then led to a series of study models where we began to explore the structure and the form of the structure. And these study models began to come together to start to suggest forms of a complete model and the kind of space that they would make in the interior. At this point, we became interested in the idea of trying to apply this structure and these sketch drawings to a project that we're currently working on, a project for a country house in County Meath in Ireland. This house has a 9x9 square grid and is conceived very much as a masonry structure, but we thought it would be really interesting to think about it as a timber structure, to think about the effect that applying the structure suggested in Charles Moore's sketches would have on this project. It also then gave a scale for thinking about the model that we would make for the exhibition. This is the section of that house with a large double height hallway in the center of the plan. And we began to think about the way that the thick timber structure could somehow encompass the bedrooms and the upper level of this section, and that the rest of the space, the lower level living spaces and the hallway, could all be the kind of shaped void in the center of the section. So a series of drawings were made exploring this idea, where there's now a column structure on the 9x9 grid of the house and a platform that supports the first floor, and then timber trusses and rafters supporting the roof above. We explored the idea of the floor as a kind of thick platform, almost like a woven structure, suggestive of Japanese houses in a way. And then we began to think in more detail about the exhibition and the display case that we were being presented with. We became interested in the idea of using mirrors in the corner of one of these shelves. In this way then, we could make a quarter of this structure and use the position of the mirrors to multiply to make the complete model. So we were interested in a way that the model would become more site-specific and more integrated into the exhibition piece. This drawing then developed that idea with the thick platform forming the ground floor, the timber columns, the timber trusses, and the timber rafters above. In plan then, the two mirrors at right angles to each other would sit into the exhibition shelf, and the structure would radiate out from the corner point. In section, you can see this thick platform, the kind of woven structure of the floor, supporting the columns, supporting the trusses and the rafters above, and then coming to meet the mirror. We then made a series of prototype models to explore how we would make the final model for the exhibition. And these models we began to make using watercolor paper because we liked the idea of the lines being very thin, of them having almost the quality of drawings. So we weren't trying to exactly replicate the scale of the timber structure, but instead to represent it as a series of thin, almost drawn lines, like we saw in the original sketches by Charles Moore. So a series of these prototypes were made with watercolor paper, with mirrors, and we photographed them to try to determine the final version. They sat in against the mirrors to multiply to suggest the full form of the space. And then you see the complete 9 by 9 square grid that's formed and is most clearly read in the floor. This then is the model sitting into the display case, where it has a kind of discrete presence. It pushes back into the corner, and then the mirrors serve to multiply it, to give it another kind of scale. And the model then sitting in the display case with its family of all the other models made by the diverse group of architects. So we'd like to thank the curators, we'd like to thank Drawing Matter, the Architecture Foundation, and the Irish Architectural Archive for all their work in pulling together this really interesting exhibition. Thank you.